Hello, darkness, my old friend. I've come to talk with you again, because a vision softly creeping left its seeds while I was sleeping, and the vision that was planted in my brain still remains within the sound of silence.
Hi, I'm Jake, and I'm going to be ripping off Philosophy Tube real badly. Today I'm going to be talking about existentialism, and specifically how it relates to the 1967 film The Graduate. This film isn't typically referred to as an existentialist piece of cinema per se, but it definitely has enough existentialist elements to warrant bringing it up. I've divided this video into 4 sections that each explain a fundamental aspect of existentialism and how it relates to the film. So, without any further ado, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Part 1. The absurd. The absurd often refers to something that is ridiculous or wacky, but to an existentialist it means something very different. The most fundamental belief of an existentialist is that life is objectively meaningless. That is, there's no unifying meaning of life that works for everyone. Therefore, searching for an objective answer to the ultimate question of life, the universe, and everything is absurd. The computer produced 42 because the question didn't make sense after all. And because of this, to an existentialist, the absurd means the struggle to find meaning in a world that is meaningless. Benjamin is knee-deep in the absurd at the start of the film. Once he returns from college, he struggles to find a path forward for himself. His parents are treating him like a fish in an aquarium. He's a fascinating little creature to show off, which is reflected in the visuals. He craves a real, fulfilling relationship, and no one is giving him what he needs. Until, of course, a certain someone comes along. Part 2. Living in bad faith. An existentialist will typically define bad faith as denial of the absurd, by thinking that life has an objective meaning or by following the meaning made by someone else. In essence, putting the responsibility on someone else to provide meaning for you instead of providing it for yourself. By being pressured into an affair with Mrs. Robinson, Ben is living in bad faith. By seeking a fulfilling relationship with Mrs. Robinson, he's putting the responsibility on her to give his life meaning, which is something that doesn't work in the eyes of an existentialist. This is best exemplified by the scene where Ben and Mrs. Robinson meet up at the hotel, and Ben wants to have a conversation before they get started. This is because he wants to connect with her on an emotional level, and the scene makes it clear that she can't give him what he needs, which is reflective of the existentialist idea that only you can find meaning in your own life. Which is why it shouldn't come as a shock that this doesn't fix the problem, it only makes it worse. He was hoping that she might give his life meaning, but she couldn't. Part 3. Authenticity. A lot of people find meaning in life through religion, but what do you do when God is giving you the silent treatment? Religious people can accept that God works in mysterious ways. Nihilists, they'll go and cry about it, and existentialists will say, "Dude, I don't know, go and figure it out yourself, jackass." And that is authenticity. The meaning of life is the meaning you give it. As Albert Camus once said, the literal meaning of life is whatever you're doing that prevents you from killing yourself. And while he isn't wrong per se, I personally think he was being a bit of a fucking drama queen. Part of the way through the movie, Ben is pressured into going on a date with Elaine Robinson, the daughter of Mrs. Robinson. He takes her to a strip club because he knows that Mrs. Robinson doesn't want him and Elaine to wind up together. When she runs out on him, there's a shift in the scene and in Ben. He takes her to a burger joint and they both start to have a really good time. This is the part where Ben goes from living in bad faith to living authentically. He stops listening to other people, for better or for worse, and finally decides that he's calling the shots now. This is also demonstrated by Elaine, who almost gets married to another man at the end until she sees Ben and decides to live authentically. And let's be real here, she made a massive mistake by going with him at the end. Dude's completely unhinged, but either way, who am I to make that call if she's living authentically? And likewise, who are you to tell me that I can't commit arson? I'm just a product of my own circumstances here. I mean, why do we even have that many orphanages? I'm just trying to draw attention to a bigger issue, and here you are trying to tell me to live in bad faith. God. Part 4. Freedom and Status Quo. Jean-Paul Sartre, one of the most prominent existentialists, often wrote about how life doesn't have to be the way that it is. Of course, most of the time he wrote about this, he was talking about abandoning capitalism, which is pretty awesome, but the point still stands. And a lot of existentialists wrote about this because humans are terrifyingly free. I mean, people can literally do whatever they want, and there's very little stopping them. I'm living proof. I'd tell you to ask those orphans, but let's just say they're a little bit well done. I mean, when it comes down to it, really the only thing that's holding us back is the chains that we put on ourselves, which is a terrifying thought. A perfect example of this is Ben doing literally everything that he can to track down Elaine's wedding. I mean, he lies through his teeth about being a minister, abandons his car in the middle of the road, and makes as much noise as he can to stop the service. He pretty much abandons decency so he can live with the woman who makes him happy. The same goes for Elaine. The moment when she screams out Ben's name in the middle of her own ceremony represents her choosing to take her own path and abandon the status quo that other people have set up for her. She's shedding the chains of stability for a path that might make her happier. So those are the reasons that I consider The Graduate to be a really existential piece of cinema, despite not really being considered a piece of existentialist cinema. I hope that this video was in some way convincing, or at least a little bit informative on existentialism, but yeah, that's about it. Later.